All right. Oh, here, I feel like the big double doors have been opened.
And the
in
red
the
carpets.
stadium.
Yeah. Tammy's got the red background. That's our red carpet.
There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to spring training. You will not be exhausted when you're finished. You'll just have a lot more information than you do now. Feel free in the chat to put where you are from and what your business is. Maybe there's somebody you will want to have a one-to-one with later, and make sure in the chat that you choose everyone. As much as Tammy and James and I would all like to meet you, when you're putting it just to host and panelists, you're not having as big a network as you could. So please put, oh good, I love to see Washington. Oh yay, my people from Washington representing. This is probably going to be one of the biggest webinars we have had. So I'm so glad we switched it to a webinar. I can't imagine having 500 little Zoom windows.
That's right.
And dogs barking and children crying. If that's the case. Texas, always represented. Wonder if there's any Oklahoma people on here. Do you think, Tammy?
I hope so. I hope I don't have zero. I have some Texas people too. But
Yeah.
I hope Oklahoma decided to hop on in.
Yeah. Good. Love it. We're just going to give everybody a minute to kind of get themselves situated. You know, traffic can sometimes be bad from the kitchen to your office or back to your bedroom. You might run into some obstacles along the way.
Carolyn's chat is awesome.
What's awesome?
Carolyn Booker. Love it, Carolyn. That was the way to do it. She knows what I'm talking about.
It goes so fast, I can't even read them all.
I know.
Oh, I'm going to take a cue from you, James. I'm going to put my chat in a different screen. Oh, now I can see more.
Jenny's living large. If you didn't know, she's got extra technology with her today, so she's loving it.
2 screens for the last month or two. I feel like I'm 50 again. Like a youngster. Oh, that's so good. All right, we're going to do like one more minute and then we'll get started. I'm so glad you're all here. In case you're just joining us, put your contact info that you want to share with everybody in the chat. And then if you find some great comments or information from somebody as we're going through here, you can save the chat at the end and you'll get all of the comments and all the contact information. You just have to click on those 3 little dots. Oh, maybe, yes, and it says save the chat. I was like, does it? It does. You can. It's real. Nebraska, love it. Ohio, we're from everywhere. So good. All right, spring training. I don't know if we have any baseball fans on today. Spring training is what we do every year. No matter how good the athletes are, they are going to go to spring training to drill the basics and make sure they have the skills they need for a great season. And you are all starting tomorrow at exactly halfway through the leadership team term. And so we thought it was a good time to check in and give you resources and new skills so that you can have just a fantastic visitor experience. And especially if you are having a Better Together Days event, we want to make sure that you can crush it. So if you are a chapter success coach or you are a visitor host, that's, I think, most of you, then you are positioned to make a lot of money for yourselves and for the people in your chapter. So if you are here and you're excited about making money for your chapter and for yourself, I want you to give me some $signs in the chat. That's what the goal is, remember, is we want to make money for the people in our chapters. That's why we're doing this in BNI, so that your business can be successful. Lots of money, so much money. Oh my gosh, that's the best thing I've ever asked for in the chat. That's fun. All right, in case there's somebody in BNI who has never been on a webinar before and doesn't know who I am, I'm Jenny Butts, and I'm the Director of Training and Sales Execution. And I am joined by my colleague, Rockstar Tammy Lackey. Good afternoon, Tammy. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Jenny. I'm very excited to be here with you guys. And I am a managing director in Oklahoma and North Texas. So I'm happy to see some of my Oklahoma and Texas people on.
Yeah, and where did you come from right before this meeting?
right before this meeting, I was lucky enough to sit in on a charter party for another chapter in Oklahoma. So we are excited to have them on board.
Yeah, just since last week, you have 2 new ones, don't you?
2 new ones. Yep. 2
So
brand new ones.
exciting. Yeah, so thank you. Tammy is going to be looking in the chat and the Q&A and helping us navigate the people who are on here. And I'm so happy to have our special guest, James Muir. You may know him from the Business Booster series that BNI did in 2020 and early 2021. You also may have caught him on the national conference circuit when we did our online conference last year. He is the author of The Perfect Close, The Secret to Closing Sales. And BNI loves James Muir, and James Muir kind of likes BNI.
No, I love
Would you agree?
BNI. I love BNI, and I've been to lots of chapter meetings. So anyway, I'm super excited to be here.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. I'm so glad you're here, and thank you. And you don't have a short history with BNI. How did you even get involved, and what have you experienced so far?
You know, before you and I started talking to each other, I had actually already been to a few chapters, but I never got to see the sort of the inner workings of how it all works until I started talking to you. So, and then I got to see a couple more chapters, and I've seen some absolutely amazing. There's one I visited in Colorado that was unbelievably, it was just the most amazing chapter I've seen. Probably somebody's on from there, but
Yeah.
Kudos to you guys. You know what you're doing. That
Yeah.
was the most well-run meeting I've ever seen. But yeah, like you said, I've been able to do several events for BNI, including the Business Booster you mentioned, the conference last year, and then some one-off stuff that resulted as that. And so my values and my outlook on sales and serving is 100% in alignment with BNI. So
good.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it was a long time before we even did something together, but it was just because I believe in the values so much that I just was helping until we finally got to, doing something together.
Something official.
Something official. Yeah.
Yeah. And what an auspicious official thing it is. And so James has been instrumental in the visitor host process that many of you are working on in your chapters, or you're experimenting with in your chapters, or whatever. We have worked with James because he knows sales, and he has been on podcasts and sought after for his sales acumen. And so we are so lucky to have him on here, and you are going to get a big chunk of his knowledge in a little bit, and we are going to weave it into the things that we're doing in your chapters for the visitor orientation specifically. So I want to make sure everybody understands it's a webinar. That's why you can only see 3 of us. You can't see yourselves. And we have places in the chat for you to put things like $signs. And we also have a Q&A so that you can ask James a specific question about something he brings up during his time. You can ask Tammy or me or other people something that has to do with your chapter or the visitor orientation process. But that is what a webinar is about, just so you know. All right, what are we doing today? Our agenda, we are going to have some basic drills, meaning we want you to have all of the resources and tools that you need to have a successful visitor experience in your chapter, specifically the orientation. It's a very strategic time in your meeting. And then we are going to talk about, with James, we're going to hear from him about having a sales mindset. And so this is going to help you not only in your chapters, but also in your businesses. And hopefully you'll be able to feel a little bit more comfortable about selling, but not feeling pushy, but actually moving a conversation so you do ask for a sale, whether it's applying for membership or something in your business. That's going to lead us naturally into the orientation pro tips so that you can have an effective time at the end of your meeting, making those visitors feel compelled to be a part of your chapter and fill out an application. And I know from having several of these calls with all of you that you want to ask questions. And so we'll leave time for some Q&A as well. And we are recording this, so if there's anybody in your chapter who was not able to be here, then that is okay, because I'm going to send a link to everybody who registered, and you'll be able to maybe watch it as a team or go back and watch it in the night so you can be better at it. All right, so let's get started with some context. Spring training is appropriate here because we are having our Better Together days in April and May. And we know that these events, whether you've been in BNI for a while and you've called it Member Extravaganza, or you've called it Activate, or this year we're having Better Together days, this is traditionally a time when we concentrate on having events that will bring in people who are not members so they can see how effective BNI is and how well it can work for their businesses. And we know they work because in April and May, we have between 25 and 40% more people renewing than we do in any other of the months during the year. So that means more people join a chapter during this period, and it works for them because they keep renewing over and over again. So in the core value of traditions plus innovation, we want to be sure that we're doing the best job we can for these time periods because they're effective. However, we would love it if we're not just using the skills we're doing today during this time frame. What if we looked at the visitor experience as a continuum and we had things planned throughout the year? And since you're only halfway through your term, you still have plenty of time to get some things going. We've had International Networking Week, of course, the first week of February, and we are right here in the Better Together Days spring visitor events. Why not start thinking now about a teacher appreciation event in the summer? They know lots of people. I know when I taught high school, I probably had 120 kids going in and out of my classroom through the periods. They all have families who have businesses. Just tell them how much you appreciate them, or first responders. And then you've got fall homecoming. That's a natural time of year to invite back people who used to be members or people who have visited but didn't join. And then some sort of a contest at the end, maybe another visitor event, a social to invite your best client. Lots of ways that we can stretch this throughout the year and use all the skills that you are going to learn today to make it a great year all around. So, basic drills that we know thriving chapters are doing on a regular basis. They are making phone calls before the meeting to make sure that people have info to get there. They are doing very intentional open networking, and they're having an effective orientation at the end of the meeting so people know how to apply, and then they're doing some good follow-up. So we are going to concentrate on the orientation today, but before we get into that part, I wanted to go over some basics because we're doing the drills, it's spring training. So if you've been on one of these calls before, you know, yep, Jenny, we know that this is what it is, but I think it bears repeating. And if this is your first event, then this will be a good thing for you to see. The phone call the day before the meeting. This can be a game changer in chapters because we know statistically up to half of the visitors who register for a meeting don't actually show up. So a phone call just to say, did you get the email? Do you have the address? And any of these other talking points could make a real difference. Because if you think of having a sales meeting at your meeting, you're going to talk to these new visitors at your meeting, then this is kind of teeing up that sales call and getting some things ready and setting expectations. And so as we talk about this, James, I wonder if there is anything in this process that makes you think of a larger sales process. You're setting things up for a meeting you know you're going to have with a potential client.
Sure. So we would use the term framing for that. So when you call them in advance and you ask certain questions or you share certain pieces of information, what you're doing is sort of framing the experience that they get. And how you frame the meeting has a very large effect on whether or not they show and whether or not they get what they expected out of the meeting. And if you're having a two-way instead of just a one-way conversation where you're talking to each other instead of just sending, hey, here's where it's at, then you'll also be able to ask them what they're expecting out of the meeting. And if that's the moment where we listen, right? I think, okay, this is what they're expecting to get. And you may uncover at that moment that they have some misconception about it. On the other hand, you might find some tips on how you can make it a better experience for them. And if you do that, you can make it a win for them right out of the chute, right? And then it's going to be a great experience for them. Even if it's just one person that they need an introduction to, and you making that call beforehand, you'll know strategically, oh, I got to get these two shaking hands with each other before everything starts. And then they've already won, right? And that's going to have a way better outcome on your orientation later.
That's so good. And that is something we haven't covered very much. That's why you're the expert, James. That's why you're here to help us.
Nice.
Yeah, so good. All right. So I hope all of you are going to be making those phone calls the day before your meetings. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Another thing that's important is once they arrive. So you see, we're kind of going chronological through the process. The open networking, whether you're online and you're doing very intentional breakout rooms with your visitors, Or if you're in person and you have the first 15 minutes of the agenda to do open networking, these conversations can continue what we're just talking about with the phone call before and be a nice bridge to the orientation afterwards, because now you're making those introductions. Also part of what we would call the sales process. So James, do you have any pointers or insight into this part of the meeting?
I would just say there's sort of a principle that is true here, that the more touches that you can have with that person, the more comfortable they're going to be. And so even though there are many touches between when they first come into the meeting or before the meeting, and then during the meeting at the very beginning before things get rolling, and then finally at the end, the more you can actually touch, right, have them communicating with other people, the more comfortable they're going to feel. And that's going to make your outcome from the orientation going to be a lot better, because they're going to feel more comfortable. You can imagine if you didn't do any of those things, then the orientation feels a little bit more cold to them, right? Because they're not sure what they're dealing with yet.
That's so true at the comfort level, because people walk into a meeting and say, what is happening here? It's so structured. And to be comfortable is really going to let them put their guard down and be open to what they're experiencing. Such a good point. And I'm seeing lots of things. Great point, James. Lots of things in the chat. Good. Yeah. All right, so phone call before the meeting, open networking, and we want to concentrate on the orientation. And why a whole hour webinar just on the orientation? I will tell you, that's an excellent question. The reason we are spending all of this time on the orientation is you have such a strategic opportunity in the last 10 minutes or so of your meeting to give context to everything your visitors have just experienced, let them know how BNI can fit in with their business, and transfer all of that into a beautiful experience, converting a visitor into a new member, and that new member can keep bringing you referrals and grow your chapter in all kinds of ways. So as we are going to talk about this orientation, you will want to keep in mind not only regular days when you have 2 or 3 visitors come into your meeting, but also events where you may have 10, 20, or 30. I talked to somebody in Illinois who just went to a visitor day where they had 35 members in the chapter and they had 60 people in the room for the visitor event.
Nice.
That, I know, that's going to be a different kind of sales process. And so we want to be able to make sure you're ready for any of that. And we want then your membership committee to be up to their eyebrows in applications and going through that process so your chapter can grow. So we're going to spend some time in the orientation talking specifically about the sales process, language, mindset, how you can have that be successful. And so I think it's fair to say in 10 minutes or so that I've been talking, you're already done listening to me. So let's be sure we're getting all of the benefits of James Muir. So I'm going to stop sharing so that James can give you all of the information you need to be successful. And he's going to share his screen and we're going to continue with the journey.
Did our technology work?
Look at that. I see
Holy
it.
smokes, this is amazing.
It was seamless.
Yeah, just like that. Well, I'm super excited to be with you guys today. You can tell that Jenny and I know each other, and I just met Tammy today, but I know she's a rock star because she just opened up a whole new chapter today in Oklahoma. So we're doing good. But anyway, what you're going to learn today, it's probably the most valuable thing that I can share with you. Because what you're going to learn will help you both in your own personal business as well as with your chapters. And it's probably especially good if you're one of those people that's not comfortable with the commitment side of things, because I'm going to throw a little science at you, but I promise you're going to really appreciate what you're about to learn here, because it's so comfortable to do. So I'm excited to share that with you. But it's going to help you both in the orientations as well as your own business. Okay. And basically, it's the best practice in closing sales. It's just 2 questions. It's no pressure, and it's 95% effective. Again, doesn't involve any pressure, but actually will strengthen the relationship that you have with the people that you're talking to. And I know that sounds like an incredible claim, but it is 100% true. And there's an outfit out there called gong.io. And what these guys do is they do outbound call analytics, okay, for outbound call centers. And they analyzed over 1 million sales calls looking for the answer to this magic question: what's the best closing approach that there is? And after analyzing over 1 million sales calls, they determined that the perfect close, which you're going to know before the end of this session, is hands down the best approach that there is for getting commitments, and that top performers are using it about 3 times an hour. So that should tell you that it doesn't get old when you use it that way, right? And I think probably the thing that I've noticed that BNI folks like best about the perfect close is just that it's 100% authentic. Right? It's an authentic way of working with customers, and it'll be completely in alignment with your own personal values. I guarantee that you'll be comfortable using it. So let me just start by asking a question. What percentage of sales situations do you think end without any commitment being asked for whatsoever? You're welcome to type it in the chat. I like Brian's, just too many, for sure, too many. Okay, well, I'm telling you, the answer is going to blow your mind. Okay, because when I found out, all right, here we go, we got 50, we got 80, we got 70. Oh, wow, there's some hardcore people in there. Well, here's the answer. 50 to 90% of all sales encounters end without any commitment being asked for whatsoever, right? And it changes a little bit by industry, but 50% is actually the low number. So like, why is that? Why don't salespeople, entrepreneurs, consultants, executives, why don't we ask? And the answer to that question basically boils down to just two things: will and skill. And will is having the desire and being comfortable asking, and skill is knowing how to ask. Okay, so let me ask you another question. You can type it in the chat. Between those two, which one do you think is the more common reason that people don't ask for commitments? Let's see what kind of, okay, we got a skill, will, skill. It's about half and half so far. All right. All right. Well, the truth is both of them are very important, right? They're both very big factors, but between those two, not having the will or the courage actually turns out to be the bigger challenge of the two. Now, the good news is I'm going to help you with both of those things before we're done here. So let's talk about skill for a minute. So 50 to 90%, right, of all meetings end with no commitment. I mean, to me, that's just a mind-blowing statistic. And so the big question is, well, why don't we? Why don't we ask, right? And what I would say is that a really big contributor to that amazing statistic is the fact that 99% of all the closing techniques that are being taught out there today are manipulative. They are, and they all have names. You've probably heard some of these. There's alternate choice close, or the yes set close, or the impending event close. There's even a close out there, I'm not kidding you, called the "What would Jesus do?" atomic bomb close. That's a real close, okay? And someday I'll put a wall of shame up that has all these ridiculous closes in it. And there's a million of these different closing gambits out there, and they're all manipulative, okay? So if you ask me why 50 to 90% of all sales encounters end without any commitment being asked for, it's not because we're afraid to ask. It's because every single one of these techniques damages trust. We don't want to damage trust, right? We want genuine, long-lasting relationships that last a lifetime, don't we? And so we instinctively know that those techniques that you might have saw in a YouTube video or read an article somewhere, we just can tell. There's no way I could do that, right? You can tell when you hear them or when you see them, you're like, there's no way I'm doing that. So rather than risk that we're going to damage trust and damage the relationship, we just don't do anything. Okay, at least that's what I used to do. That's what I used to do. But there's a better way. There's a way that doesn't damage the relationship. It makes the customer feel like they're in control, and a way that makes you a consultant and a coach rather than a pushy salesperson, right? And of course, that's going to be the perfect close. But before I share the questions with you, I want to share with you the myth that I fell for early on in my sales career that really held me back for a long time. So I'm trying to shortcut so you don't have to, suffer the same way I did. But and if you don't know, by the way, I'm an accidental salesperson. I did not intentionally get into sales. Okay, I used to be an accounts receivable manager for a rev cycle company. So that's another story for another day. But the myth that I fell for when I first got into sales 30 years ago is just that the sale would close itself. Right? It would just happen by itself. And I can tell you some really hilarious stories, some actually sad stories about me thinking that, right? But here's what the data says. Okay, what the data says is that you have to have you have to exert some kind of an effort in order for the sale to be successful. And like I shared a minute ago, 50 to 90% of all sales encounters, nobody even asks anything. Okay, so the problem of not asking at all is actually even bigger than a bigger problem than asking for commitments in the wrong way. Okay. And so what the data says, based on some research done by a guy named Neil Rackham, which I'll tell you about in a second, is that just asking one question will raise your chances of advancing or closing the sale by 36%. And Neil Rackham says it this way. Okay. And he's, I'm going to tell you more about him in a second, but there's a ton of research behind this statement. He goes, traditional closing techniques are not the best way to obtain commitments from customers. He goes, but as we've seen, doing nothing isn't effective either. The sale won't close itself. Okay, so the fact of this particular myth that I learned, years too late, unfortunately, is that sales don't close themselves. Okay, you need to make some kind of effort to advance the sale. So, and before I share what that way is, let me just point out that it's kind of important that before you go into any interaction, right, any kind of a meeting, you should have a couple of outcomes in mind. Okay, and what I mean by that is, what do you want to happen as a result of your interaction, right? Your meeting. And what you should have is an ideal advance and then an alternate advance, a couple of alternate advances. Okay, so basically 3 kinds of things that you could do. Now, you might not be used to that term in advance. Let me tell you what an advance is. So here's Neil Rackham again, right? And if you didn't know, Neil Rackham actually conducted the largest sales study ever conducted. Okay, and the world of selling goes a debt of gratitude to this guy. And we learned a lot of stuff about the research that he did. And he ended up coining the term an advance in relationship to a sale. And the simple definition is just moving the sale forward in a little way. Okay, just moving the sale forward in a little way. That's the simple definition of an advance. But more interesting is why he had to create it. And the reason he had to create this new term is because Neil Rackham discovered that 9 out of 10 sales interactions actually did not end with a win or a lose. That's not what happens. What happens in 9 out of 10 sales interactions is we either get an advance where the sale moves forward in a little way, or we get what he calls a continuation, which is a situation where the sale is going to continue, but no progress is made. Okay, so hopefully that's making sense. But the key takeaway here is that there's a lot of little sales or micro commitments on our way to the big sale, and those are our advances. Okay, and those advances are actually slightly different for every one of your sales, right? Everybody that's on here. So there's, there may be 300 people on here, and every one of you has a slightly different set of little micro advances or micro commitments that are involved on your way to the sale. So I can't give you a template of what every one of you should say, but I can do it for some contexts like an orientation meeting. And so I'm going to share those with you here in just a second. Okay. So before we go into any interaction, right, any kind of a meeting, what we want to have is an ideal advance, which is our best possible outcome. And then we want to have a couple of alternative advances just in case that ideal advance turns out to be unrealistic for some reason. Okay, does that make sense? It's a little bit like having a backup plan. Okay, and with that prepared, then you are ready to execute the perfect close. And there's just 2 questions to the perfect close, and it's pretty common that you'll only need to use the first one. And that first question is this. So this might be worth writing down. I think someone's asked if they'll get the slides, and we'll get the slides to you guys before we're done. And so the first question is this: does it make sense for us to X? Okay, let me say that again. Does it make sense for us to X? Where X is going to be whatever your ideal advance is for this meeting, right? So let's just say we're a consultant and we're doing this for our own personal business. Then an example that might be, does it make sense for us to schedule an assessment to see what our best options are? Okay, in that example, the assessment is going to be the X, right? Our ideal advance. So a BNI example, during an orientation meeting or maybe just before, we might say, hey, does it make sense for me to share how referrals might fit into your current marketing strategy? Okay, in that example, the X is sharing how the referrals might fit into their way of getting leads right now. And so you can see how comfortable it is, hopefully already, right? All right, so let's think about this for a second. What are they going to respond with? Well, there's only 2 things they're going to say. Either going to say yes, or they're going to say no. Okay. If they say yes, awesome. You just got permission to go to that stage. We're going to add on to this here in just a second. If they say no, then you're just going to ask some variation of the second question. And that second question is something like, wait for it. Okay, well, what do you think is a good next step? And what I can tell you is that after hundreds of ride-alongs and then hundreds of meetings, that in 90% of cases, your client or your customer that you're talking to will suggest a very logical advance that's appropriate for where they're at right now in their evaluation or their buying process. Okay. And so it's very simple, but basically this is a super important point here, is that the best close is the one that paces at the rate that the other person is ready for. And by doing it this way, we're just pacing the sale at exactly the rate that they're ready for. It's when we try to push them faster than they're ready for, that's when it starts to feel like manipulation to them. Okay. But doing it the way I just described, it's going to be easy and completely non-confrontational. All right, so there's a couple of nuances, but basically what you see on the screen right now, that's basically the model, okay? And so what you end up with is either an advance or a close every single time you do what I just shared. So literally, if you did nothing more than that simple model I just shared with you, you'd end up with a close or an advance 90% of the time. Pretty good, right? Now, I hear you, right? This is not my first rodeo. Hey, James, 90% is pretty good, but it's not perfect. You named it perfect, right? All right. So touche, you're right. And as it turns out, we can actually make these even better. Okay. There are actually 5 variations of the perfect close. And the one that you just learned is the kindergarten version. So the first enhancement that we're going to do is called the suggestion. And in the suggestion, or in that enhancement, we're just going to add a little prefix to that very first question. And that prefix is something like this. Okay. Other clients at this stage tend to do X. Okay, something like that. And so let's just use that same example that I did a second ago, right? Like, so we're consultants and we say, hey, you know, other clients at this stage typically have us do an assessment to see what our best options are. Does it make sense for us to talk about scheduling an assessment for you guys? Okay, now do you see how facilitative it is, right? It's still zero pressure. In fact, it's helpful, right? A lot of us, we sell something that customers don't buy very often. And so, you know, some people, like, I don't know, if you sell houses or whatever, it might be once or twice in a lifetime that people make the purchase like that. In those situations, they are not all as prepared as you are to know what a good next step is. So when we suggest a logical next step, you're actually helping them because they might be in unfamiliar territory, okay? So a BNI example of this is the second one you see on the screen there. And it might be something like, you know, most visitors at this, so we might be in an orientation meeting and we say this, you know, most visitors at this stage will want to know what it takes to get involved. Does it make sense for me to share with you how it works? Okay, again, do you see how facilitated that is, right? There's still no pressure. And as it turns out, you can use that suggestion in the fallback question, right? So instead of just throwing them the ball and saying, hey, what do you think is a good next step? If the first question doesn't turn out right, then you could say, oh, well, you know, I understand, you know, a lot of clients at this stage will do this other thing. Does it make sense for us to do that? And again, hopefully you can see here that we're just coaching them along in the process. Okay. Now I'm gonna pause for 1 second here because there's some important nuance and some additional variations. And then once you understand those, you're going to just realize how perfect this is. But what I learned over the years is that the stem of question 1 is just so simple that it's really easy for folks to miss its power. Okay. And so when you're teaching the perfect close for the first time, do you want to know what people are worried about the most? Okay. What they're concerned with is, well, what if they say no? What if they say no to my ideal advance? That's what they're worried about. So let's think about this for a second, right? If we ask them, does it make sense? And they say no, what have they really said no to? Did they say, no, I'm not going to buy? No, because we didn't ask them to buy, right? Did they say, no, I'm not going to fill out an application? No, because we didn't ask them to fill out an application. Okay. We only asked if it made sense. Okay. So we're not really asking them to do anything. At its core, does it make sense as a timing question? Okay. Are you guys tracking with me? Because this is really a big deal. This is a key point. With a perfect close, the customer cannot reject your course of action. They can only reject the timing of it. Okay. And that turns out to be a big deal. But the best part is they can clearly see the direction that we're headed, but we haven't actually asked for the commitment yet, right? We've only asked about the timing. And what that means, guys, is regardless of their answer, we end up on emotionally much, much higher ground. So you can't bomb out. Okay. Again, zero pressure, completely non-confrontational. All right. Now, when you use the suggestion model in the secondary question, we call that the fallback. Okay. And so with the fallback, if the customer says no to your ideal advance for whatever reason, right, we're just going to fall back to one of those alternate advances that we prepared. That's why we prepared them, right? And so we might say, hey, you know, does it make sense for us to X? And they say, you know, they kind of hesitate. You go, okay, well, you know, a lot of customers at this stage sometimes do this other thing. Does it make sense for us to do that? Okay. And the truth is you can fall back multiple times if you want to, right? But what you'll end with at the end, so you're going to use the force after you ask that second suggestion question. And if the force tells you that it's still okay, you could say, well, sometimes there's this other thing they do, and you can suggest your third advance that you had prepared. If not, if the force is telling you don't do it, well, then don't, and throw the ball back to them and say, okay, well, what do you think is a good next step then? Okay, make sense? So, and basically this is what I just meant. In theory, you could fall back an infinite number of times. Don't do that. Don't do it more than twice. That's self-serving. We're just doing this to help the other person out, right? But what you can see here is we've got a very facilitative way to coach the customer on a couple of good options and then throw the ball back to them and see what they're comfortable with. And like I said, if they don't take your two options, you'll still 90% of the time, they'll tell you where they're at in the process and they'll suggest the next step. And then you'll go, oh, wow, I never even thought of that one, right? All right. So as it turns out, so that's pretty cool, but there's an even cooler version. Okay. It's called the add-on. And the add-on is the exact reverse of the fallback. So instead of falling back to the alternate advances that you prepared, you're going to add them on instead. Okay. So in other words, when you achieve success with your ideal advance, we're just going to keep on piling on advances until we've matched the pace that the client wants to go. And the key here, which is really important, is that's all you're doing is you're just pacing the sales cycle to match the client's buying cycle, right? If they want to go faster, then we're going to go faster. If they want to go slower, then we're going to go slower. Now, there's one other unique aspect to the add-on, and that is, remember how with the fallback, the last thing you say is, okay, what do you think is a good next step, right? The thing you say at the end of the add-on is something like this. Are there any other logical steps we should be considering right now? Okay, something like that. And what that does is it gives the client a chance to suggest any action items or next steps that make sense to them that maybe you hadn't even thought of. Okay, let me give you an example of this. I'm going to share a story with you. So me and my team were working with a healthcare organization in Sierra Vista, Arizona, and we were demoing to what we thought was the wrong people. It was a CIO and his group of IT people. And so our ideal advance was to get a presentation with the executive team, because that's who we thought was going to be making the decision here, right? So when it comes time, I just ask them, I say, hey, does it make sense for us to talk about scheduling a demo for the rest of your team so we can get their input and participation? He goes, yeah, we need everybody on board. I'm like, woohoo, right? Cha-ching, right? I just got my ideal advance. So I just look at my list, right? I said, well, a lot of clients at this stage will have us schedule time for our technical teams to talk about the conversion. Does it make sense for us to, schedule time for our tech people to talk? He goes, oh yes, my guys are super worried about that. That's a great idea. I'm like, wow, cha-ching, right? I'm 2 for 2. So I just look at my list, right? And I go, I think we've got everything we need here for me to create like a preliminary proposal. Does it make sense for me to put together like a preliminary proposal just so you can get a feel for the scope of the project? He goes, yes, that would be super, helpful. And I'm like, wow, right? I'm 3 for 3. And that's all I had prepared, guys. So I just asked him that last question. I go, all right, well, is there any logical steps we should be thinking about right now? And you will not believe what this guy says, right? So he kind of looks around a little bit to make sure there's nobody around. And then he kind of lowers his voice. He goes, well, James, is there any chance I can get a copy of your standard agreement? Because our legal people can be kind of slow. Right. And of course, on the outside, I'm cool as a cucumber, right? I'm like, oh yeah, of course, I'd be happy to get you a copy, of our standard agreement. But on the inside, I'm like, yeah, baby, are you kidding me? This guy just asked me for a contract, right? You ever have a moment like that? Yeah. And so here's the crazy thing, right? We didn't even think we were presenting to the right people. I never even dreamed that sending a contract would be a realistic next step, right? And here's what I'll suggest. I think if I had suggested, I just don't think it would have come off. Right? If I just said, hey, does it make sense for me to get your paperwork right away? I don't think it would have worked. And so the key here is that the takeaway is that by diplomatically pacing it at exactly the rate that this guy was ready for, we scored an amazing 4 advances, one of which we never even dreamed would have been possible in the meeting that we were in, right? So obviously this is the most fun out of all the variations, because in a smooth and zen-like fashion, we just keep piling on advances until we've matched the pace that the client's ready to go. So like I said before, you got to use the force just a little bit here with a person, but basically preparing those advances in advance before you go in the meeting, having an ideal advance and a couple of alternatives prepares you optimally to speed up or slow down to match the pace that your client wants to go. And then all of your deals will be slowly or perhaps quickly moving forward, at least moving forward at the pace that the client wants instead of stalling out. All right. Now let's do a quick review. Look what and I don't know how long we've done this for. I'm sure Jenny's keeping score here, but look what you've learned already, right? In maybe the 10 minutes or 15 minutes we've been talking. You learned the 2 basic questions of the perfect close. You learned the suggestion model where we say other clients at this stage do X. Does it make sense for us to do X? You learned how to use that suggestion model in the fallback, where we use our suggestion to fall back to one of the alternate advances that you prepared. And you just learned the add-on, where in a smooth and zen-like fashion, we just keep piling on advances until we've matched the pace that the client's ready to go. Right? Pretty cool, right? So you learned a lot in just a short amount of time. And that's my goal, by the way. My job is to make complex things simple. So before we go to the next section, I thought you might want to see some possible examples of using the perfect close in a visitor orientation, right? So some of the things you might be saying. And I could have come up with a million of these. And so if this is a slide as a PowerPoint violation because it has a lot of copy on it, just know we'll get you the slides so you can read this, right? So you don't have to write this down. But we might say, depending on where we're at in our meeting, most visitors at this stage are interested in seeing how referrals might fit into their current marketing strategy. Does it make sense for me to show you how that works? Something like that. Okay, so that you can see we're using a suggestion to talk about. We're calling it it's called a sentence index is what it is, right? So we're setting the index on their current marketing strategy, and then we're saying, hey, you want to see how referrals fit into that, right? They're going to say yes to this, guys. So or if moving a little farther, we might say, usually most visitors at this stage will want to know what it takes to get involved, right? In other words, this looks good to me, right? Does it make sense for me to share with you how it works? Right. And so now we're talking about, okay, what's the next step, right? There might be an application involved or something like that, right? And you could just jump straight to that. You could say, most folks at this stage will want to apply. Does it make sense for me to send you an application via email? Okay, so that's an option. Another one that I've got towards the bottom of the screen is if we drew a little branching here, this is an example of one. We say, does it make sense for me to send you an application via email? If they say yes, awesome, you just do it. Okay. If they say no, then I could just throw the ball out to them and say, what do you think is a good next step? Or I could use the suggestion to say, well, a lot of other clients at this stage will want to attend a second meeting just so they can get a closer feel for what it's going to be like to work with this group of people. Does it make sense for us to schedule you for the next one? And so even if we didn't get an application or one of the more, we'll say advances that progresses it further, we're not down and out. Right, we're falling back to one of those things. And maybe Jenny, this would be a good. What are some other advances that maybe are a logical thing that they could do in their visitor orientation in addition to these? Anything you can think of that I've missed?
Well, one thing that I have heard people talk about, there's a gal in Canada who says she has a member in one of her chapters who is the visitor host every single year because he has coffee with everybody that comes to visit their chapter. And so another follow-up might be, well, does it make sense for me to maybe give you a call tomorrow and we can have coffee? Whether they come back to your chapter or not, you're still expanding your network. So just making connections could be another point that you hope to achieve.
Yeah, and I think if we tried hard, we could probably come up with, in fact, if we had this group of people, we probably have 300 or so on, we could probably brainstorm a number of them, right? And so the key is when you walk into that orientation meeting, think, okay, well, here's what and usually I have my clients just plan out exactly what they're going to say. And then when it comes time, it's really easy, right? And I usually have an agenda too. And at one point it says action items and next steps. And that's the moment where you're going to ask your perfect close question. And then if you've got some alternatives, you might fall back to one of them, or you might advance even more quickly, right? All right, so let's keep rolling here because I promised to tell you about both skill and will. Okay, right? And you just learned the skill part. Like literally, I don't know, in 15 minutes or so, you just learned the best practice in closing sales. Okay. And so what I want to do now is I want to talk a little bit about motivation. When I say will, that's what I mean. It's the motivation to ask for a commitment. And for some of my clients, that's been an issue in the last 24 months, right? Because of COVID, it's got them kind of all down and out because how it's been affecting their business. Other clients, COVID's actually helped their business, but we've already gone a long way towards addressing the will problem because you just learned a way to ask for the sale or ask for a commitment in a way that's facilitative and completely non-confrontational. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the question itself damaging the relationship in any way, and that's the reason most people don't ask. Okay, so that's a big deal. Now, as it turns out, there's 3 keys to long-lasting and sustained motivation. Now, and I want to have some time for Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the most important one of those. This person that you see on the screen right here is Kaiba Gianfrido. And Kaiba was born with a defective trachea that caused him to stop breathing almost every day after he reached about 6 weeks old. Okay, his parents were literally doing CPR on him almost every single day. And ordinary doctors did not expect him to live. And it would happen anywhere. It would happen in a theater, in a restaurant. It happened in a moving car one time. And before I go on here, just think about what it'd be like as a parent, right? Can you imagine that? Just think, knowing at any moment your child might just stop breathing and die. Do you think they got any sleep at all? And then what about Kaiba, right? Hopelessly struggling for air. I mean, the whole story is just tragic. And they saw a ton of doctors, but because it was a birth defect, they just didn't have any answers for it, right? They said, oh, one of these times they're not going to catch it, right? And Kaiba's not going to make it. Eventually, they got to this guy. This is Dr. Glenn Green at University of Michigan C.S. Motts Children's Hospital. And Dr. Green had developed this amazing 3D printed medical splint that could possibly be applied to Kaiba's trachea and maybe save his life. Okay, but the problem is that it was a brand new procedure, brand new technology, had never been used on a patient, and it hadn't been approved for use by the FDA. So he couldn't use this thing. But you can see what it looks like right here in this picture, right? It's just this little thing. I mean, for Kaiba, that tracheal splint was about the size of the top of a pencil because he's just a little kid, right? And like I said, it was new technology. So what Dr. Green did is he went to some great lengths to try to help Kaiba out. And so he found and he used an emergency provision at the FDA to get approval to maybe use this tracheal splint and try and save his life. Unfortunately, the FDA approved it. Okay, and so they did this procedure for the first time, not on an adult like they had planned on, but on an infant instead. And the procedure was a success, right? Thankfully, That biodegradable 3D printed medical splint saved Kaiba's life. And you can see these pictures, these cute pictures of Kaiba here after the surgery, right? Now, this is an emotional story, right? And we all marvel with gratitude at the efforts that were gone to by Dr. Green to save this young child's life. And we can sense, we can connect with the goodness of it, right? We're grateful to call ourselves part of humanity when we see behavior like this. We say to ourselves, yeah, if I could save a life that way, I would do it. Don't we? Don't we? Did you know there was a sale here? The CT and the MRI scans that made the printing possible cost money. The lasers, the 3D printers, the biodegradable materials to print with, none of that had been on a reimbursement schedule. Okay, there was no way to fund this thing at all. This is the guy that's responsible for making that sale. His name is Scott Hollister. Okay, and we don't hear too much about the selling parts of these stories, but I've spent my whole life in healthcare, and so what I can tell you is that there are thousands of stories just like this one. So let me ask you a question. Is anybody unhappy that a sale was made here? No, not at all, right? In fact, we're super grateful that a sale was made, because that sale, Scott Hollister, saved a child's life. It saved Kaiba's life. Okay, so let me ask you another question. Why is it that we see this type of sale different than other kinds of sales? Why is that? Okay, and I'll tell you what I think, right? It's because we can more easily see the positive effect that the sale had on the person's life, right? We can make the connection. And without Scott Hollister's effort to get that splint funded, right, and reimbursed by the insurance company, that would have never been made, right? And a child's life would have been lost. So these dramatic examples help us to see what selling really is. It's service. Selling is an act of service. And I know that not every solution aims to achieve the same lofty goals as a biodegradable medical splint. Some feed the hungry, some ease people's pain, some help people travel or communicate. A ton of solutions actually just help people focus on higher value activities like family, right? But every solution that we sell, okay, everybody that's on this call helps someone achieve a goal, fulfill a dream, or avert a crisis. One of those three things. Okay, every solution, regardless of how big or how small it is, helps a real person move from where they're at right now to the place that they want to be. Okay, and helping a customer move towards that goal is an act of service, and it shouldn't be difficult or stressful at all. It should be easy in the same way that we say to ourselves, if I could save a life that way, I would do it without hesitation, right? Because selling is serving. Now, I want you to remember that. Okay, when we're done today, and you've got all this information and you've learned all these things, I want you to remember that. I acknowledge that it is hard some days, right? It is hard, but it is 100% noble, and it is 100% satisfying when we make it that way. Okay, when we remember that selling is serving, we and the customer's lives are enriched in a virtuous cycle, and there should be no hesitation in that. We should want to help them, right? And that makes selling motivating in its own right, because what we're looking for is an opportunity to help that person achieve their goal. So now, in a very short version, you have learned everything you need to address the two things we talked about, skill and will, right? You know how to close in a way that's just two questions. It's no pressure, and it's 95% effective. A way that draws you closer to your client, right? Improves your relationship with the client rather than damaging trust, right? And you know that selling is serving. So you're going to be motivated to go out there and to help and to serve. And so as we wrap up, I just want you to remember one more thing. And that is, if there's really a secret to selling, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and I've managed all kinds of people and done all kinds of industries. If there's a secret to selling and a secret to success in your visitor orientation, it's this. Actually care. Actually be glad that they're there. Be glad that they're about to take. If you've experienced any kind of success because of getting referrals, I'm telling you, I've seen the data. It is hands down the number one way. It converts at the highest rate. There's no other lead opportunity channel that they could possibly be using right now that is even close to what referrals are. And if you want some data on that, ask me during the Q&A. I have slides. But if you are there and you actually care about them and they can sense that for you, right? If you're actually caring for them, caring for your customers, caring for the person right in front of you right now, and being 100% present, 100% authentic, they will respond to you, because it's your intent that matters more than the technique does. Okay, so if you go into 100% of your interactions focusing on how you can genuinely help them succeed, you could mess up the technique that you just learned, that I just shared with you. You could mess it up all over the place and they will still come back for you, right? Because intent matters more than the technique does. Okay, now everybody always asks where they can get those little diagrams. Well, the good news is that we're going to give you these slides. So you'll have these slides and a recording of this session. So you'll have those. If you would like to just download a little PDF of them, you can go to puremuir.com/resources. There's a whole bundle there that includes even some that we weren't able to cover. There's actually more than the 4 variations, but you learned a lot today in a very short amount of time. So it's 100% free if you want that. Now, Jenny, I'm not sure how much time we have because you're the one with the clock, but I'm happy to field any questions that may have come up during the session. I'll go here and look at the chat real quick here, but by the way, this is my favorite part for sure, right? So we're not limited to today's contents. So if you've got something you're interested in, I'm happy to take a crack at it.
You know what I think I would like to do, if it's okay with you, is I would, because we've been answering some of the questions along the way and there's lots in the chat. So I'd like to just take a minute to have people think about their questions, put them in the Q&A. But if we can go back to my slides again for a minute, and then we'll come back to the Q&A after everybody has a minute to process, I think that might be helpful. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I think that was so helpful. And the chat was just blowing up all along the way. So I know people got a lot of value out of it. And all I want to do is bring it back to this orientation process, and for you to remember, because you've experienced it yourself with your own membership, you are creating a life. You are helping to solve problems. You are doing things with your BNI membership that weren't possible before you became a BNI member, because of the relationships and because you have more income than you would have otherwise. So I just want to make sure that you see that we have a lot of tools that we will send you afterwards that you can also incorporate in follow-up or in the presentation that you're giving in your orientation, so you are conveying the value of a BNI membership to the people who are coming into your chapter. So, this one is an orientation audit. So your chapter success coaches have a version of this. So if you want some help really perfecting your language and the process in your orientation to properly convey how significant a membership could be in their businesses and in their lives, this is a way for you to make sure you're hitting the best talking points and going through the process in a way that will make your orientation effective. And so this is a great conversation for visitor hosts to have with the chapter success coaches to make sure that you are moving forward in a way that makes it good for the whole chapter. We also have several slides and documents that I'm going to send you in a follow-up email. So you'll have the recording, you'll have these slides, you'll have James's slides, and you'll have all kinds of links and helpful information so that you can get ready for your Better Together days with these materials. This is a great document that outlines the benefits of BNI, the commitments that BNI makes to its members and vice versa, and it will help clarify some of the questions that your visitors have so that you're not spending all of the time in the orientation answering random or outlier questions. You can get to the meat of what you want to convey to them. These are some of the slides you all have seen in your orientation. These are the ones that James helped us to create because these are his statistics. You see his little logo there. And so this is to show how effective referrals are in getting new business, which is a high priority for anyone in business. We also have slides for you that are going to talk about how effective referrals and relationships are in selling and keeping clients over the long term. This is something, if people have questions, how are you meeting? I know we know some meetings that only go once a month in other networking groups. Why is BNI doing it this way? And what if I don't want to drive every week? So this is a concise summary of the different kinds of meeting formats that we have. And here's another graphic by our lovely marketing department to talk about the ROI on referrals and versus anything else. And you all certainly know about the limited time offers that we have. Some will end at the end of June, some will keep going, but we want you to know what those are, what the prices are, so that you can answer questions, give them the tangible pieces of information that they might need. So I just wanted to make sure that you have all of that information. And now we can see if there are any questions. And I have a special announcement, so don't jump off the call too early because I have a special announcement. But are there any questions here
Tammy, are there some? They've been going past really fast for me. So
Yeah.
if you see some in there and you want to team up to me, you can. What I can say is that Andrew's given some good advice out here about talking about costs. And I'm happy to share some slides, guys. I could go, I told you I came from the accounts receivable world, right? And so I'm a little type A. And so when I first got into sales, I actually created this little chart that said, it was like a flow chart. It said, customer's going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and the customer's going to do this, and I'm going to do this, right? And so I would literally give that to people. And I told you I was an accidental salesperson, and that I was not asking for any kind of commitment. I would just help the sale close itself. And one time I'm working with this group in Vegas, and I'm presenting. It's supposed to go about 45 minutes, and then it's an hour, and then it's an hour and 15, and it's an hour and 30 minutes. And I could tell, at 45 minutes, they were there. We were done. And I remember thinking I should ask these guys to buy this, but I didn't. I just found myself, I kept on going. And this guy, this administrator of this clinic, stops me in the middle of my sentence. He goes, James, I think we're right here. And he shows me that flow chart that said, sign agreements, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then later he goes, I was waiting for you to see if you would ask. And he goes, and then I realized you were never going to ask. And so I had to stop you. So anyway, that's my little funny version of I used to just keep on going until someone would stop me, and then they would close me and say that, right? So if you're in that boat, I can relate to that. And so learning that you just have to ask one non-confrontational commitment question makes a huge difference, right? And if you just plan it out in advance and know that it's not going to hurt the relationship, it's super easy to do.
Right. Several people have asked in the chat or in the Q&A, you said every sale does 3 things, and everybody seems to remember 1 or 2 of them, but they can't remember all 3. Can you say all 3 of those things again?
Every sale does 3 things. I don't know, man. That sounds like somebody's theory around selling. I think sales does a lot of
No,
things.
you said it. It was on the slide. It averts a crisis.
Oh, yeah. We can pull that back up again, or I can just tell you what it is. But yeah, every single thing we saw, regardless of whether it's something big or whether it's small, helps someone achieve a goal, fulfill a dream, or avert a crisis.
There we go.
Those
Alan got 2 of them. Fulfill a dream, avert a crisis, achieve a goal. Yes.
Yeah, those 3 things.
Yeah, those were coming up a lot. All right. Okay, let me share some very exciting things with you. And as we mentioned on the beginning of the call, if you have a question, we can stick around afterwards. I do want to be sensitive to the people who need to jump off at the bottom of the hour. Also, as soon as you log out, you should get a 4-question survey, maybe 5 questions. I would love your feedback so we can keep making these events very, very effective for you. Tomorrow, no April Fools, really tomorrow, we are going to have all of our new virtual visitor host videos and emails that will go out to all of your visitors. So as you are planning visitor days for April and May, know that they are going to get these updated things with a little video from this person. I don't know who she is, the virtual visitor host. And all of these videos will go out to say, hello, I'm so glad you registered for a meeting. Here's what you can expect, etc. So that is happening tomorrow. We're very, very excited that it's going to be the first thing in April. The other exciting thing that I want to be sure that we talk about is, to wrap up, I want to give an award that we have never given before. And we're just going to embrace traditions plus innovation. Usually a lot of chapters look at friendly people as good visitor hosts, but then that's kind of it. Well, we don't know what else to do with you, so we'll just put you in the visitor host role. I'm sure none of your chapters did that, but sometimes it happens. But we are seeing more and more in the last year, you are instrumental to making this process work so that you are helping your members make more money by expanding their chapter. So we wanted to recognize that. And so today I'm going to give the first Visitor Host Red Carpet Award for doing some outstanding things, for outstanding service in creating exceptional visitor experience and contributing to the growth of the chapter. And these are the people that we are going to continue to recognize who make a difference, somebody who gets it, somebody who's really working hard to make things work for your chapter. And the prize for today, the reward for this effort for this individual, is a virtual ticket. I'm not buying you a ticket to San Diego, I'm sorry. A virtual ticket to our national conference, which is happening at the end of April, the 28th through the 30th. And you will be able to hear, yes, this keynote speaker. You'll have exclusive online content and access to all of the recordings of the sessions for a year, including some of these fun and informative people. So I'm very, very happy to announce that this first recipient of the award for the Red Carpet Award is none other than Peggy Davis from Houston, Texas. So congratulations, Peggy. Your chapter success coach, Judy Young, wanted to say wonderful things about you. She nominated you, and I just wanted to let everybody know that Peggy is instrumental from the point of reaching out and inviting visitors all the way through follow-up and personal connections so they can join as enthusiastic members. She's brought a significant share of the chapter's visitors, and she's worked with the visitors to make the process smooth and welcoming. And so we have a large number of visitors who join, or they still have pending applications right now. And Judy wanted me to share this story that Peggy went out of her way to help a prospective member who was having trouble with payment. And so Peggy got all of the relevant people on board to address the issues. So this visitor was able to apply and join and become an enthusiastic member. So congratulations, Peggy. The chat is blowing up for you. That was such a great story. And we're so, so proud of the efforts you are making in your chapter. And I believe it's called the, what is it, Fort Bend BNI chapter in Houston. So that chapter is rocking. If you want to go visit a chapter in Houston, you can go check out what Peggy is doing in the visitor experience. So congratulations to Peggy. We're so excited. So I'm going to get in touch with you after this call, Peggy, and I'll give you a special code so you can register for the conference and you can start embracing lifelong learning almost immediately. Okay, so before we go to any last minute questions, just so you know, you can put Thursday, May 19th on your calendar so that we can plan for your chapters not to do the coasting that a lot of chapters do over the summer. Your business is still operational in the summer. Even if you have a tutoring company, I know because I used to work for one and we would still tutor and do things in the summer. So put Thursday, May 19th on your calendar, same time, same format. And I will put all of the links up on your regional calendar. So you can go there. I think they might already be there. So you can check May 19th, register there. If it's not there now, it will be very soon. So if that is all the information you need to have a long life with happiness and fulfillment, then I will release you into the wild to do that exactly at the bottom of the hour as promised. And if any of you would like to continue and ask some questions, then we will do that too. We have a little bit of extra time. So if you're hopping off, thank you so much for being here. And if anybody has any questions, let's navigate that right now.
Okay, Jenny, I got a couple here. So if you don't mind, I'll just answer them so everybody can hear. So one of them was around, hey, the thing I sell doesn't really cost anything because they need to make a commitment. I think this was for a travel person. So of course there really is a commitment. It's a commitment of time on their part, right? And so, but when you're asking them for commitment, there are some other things like just sitting down and talking to you and exploring destinations that they might want to go on. Do they, how do they want to travel, right? Do they want to be high rollers or do they want to do it affordably, right? Those kinds of things are very small little commitments that we could say, hey, most of the clients, when I talk to them, right, we're using our suggestion here. They actually, first of all, they want to know what kind of options they would have for the budget that they've got. And they'd like to know, what's possible. Can they do the A, B, or C, right? And to the degree you can just give them the honest truth there about what people typically ask you, then that's telling you the advances that you can ask for. And then you're just going to say, does it make sense for us to schedule a 10-minute chat to figure out what it looks like for you, and I can give you some ideas of what you're looking for. Then you've got the conversation, and once they get interested in your travel solution, now we can have a real conversation, right? And so I don't know if I'm inserting myself, and I don't remember who actually. When I commented, it made the question disappear, so I don't know the name of the person that asked that. But just ask it if you need clarification on that. Just ask again, and I'll elaborate a little bit more. Two people asked something about what if they ask about the price. Okay, and so I'm going to give you two contexts. If you're doing a visitor orientation, guys, just tell them the price. Okay, so but what I would do is instead of just saying it's this much, what you want to do is contrast that with the return that it's produced for you personally, right? If you're running that visitor orientation meeting, I can just tell, I was just telling Jenny this the other day. I said, we don't have enough time to tell all the crazy stories that I've had. But so this is when I was in healthcare. I don't know how many years ago this was. This was in like early 2000s. And I go to this clinic, and the clinic, what our solution was way overkill for this clinic, right? And so this lady, she, I told her, I said, I just think that we're too much, right? It's not really an ideal match for you. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna suggest a couple other systems that you could go with, and I know who their salespeople are. I'm gonna just give you their numbers, and then I'll have them call you. Okay. And of course, salespeople are all over that. So she got great service from these guys when I referred them, and I didn't think anything more of it. Okay. And then later, I closed about 2 years later, I closed the largest deal the company had ever had. It was Banner Health Systems. If anybody here is in Phoenix, they'll know exactly who I'm talking about, right? And so there's some Banner Health Systems in Colorado as well. And so it was a lot of money. It was overall, over the course of a couple of years, it was about $10 million, right? So I'm having a conversation with Glenn Edwards, their CIO. And I asked him, I said, well, Glenn, I don't even remember how is it that you found us, right? This is years later after the sale has happened. And he goes, it was this later. Her name was Karen. And he goes, Karen referred me. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So guys, this lady that I never even did business with, 2 years later, referred me to Glenn Edwards, and that created the largest deal that our company had ever seen. Okay. So when I'm telling you about being 100% genuine and being authentic, everybody on this call, I'm sure, knows that reciprocity is the principle that is involved in why referrals work. However, that's not why we do it. Okay. Why we do it is because it's the right thing to do, right? That's the point. It's the right thing we do. So the reason I just contrasted that is if someone asks you in the middle of an orientation what it costs, just tell them. And then I say, but let me just tell you what one referral did for me. Let me just tell you what one referral did for me. Okay. And what you're trying to say is, and this is 100% true, that the cost of BNI is a pittance compared to the avalanche of business that you can get when you do it right. And so that's how I would, if they ask for the price, don't hold back, just give them the price. Okay. Now, if you're in a different kind of business, it's not as straightforward. Sometimes if what you sell is straightforward, you can just give them the answer, then you should. On the other hand, sometimes if I ask Jenny, hey, Jenny, I'll pay you to mow my lawn, the next thing she would say is, well, gosh, James, how big is your yard? Right. And so some of our businesses, we can't actually quote until we understand what the customer's doing better. And so what you need to do is you need to get the customer off of the price, right, and onto solving their problem. Right. And so there's a couple ways of doing that. One way is to bracket the answer. Say most of my clients end up investing between A and B. Can you see yourself fitting in between there? Right. Then they understand we're not trying to negotiate right now. I'm just trying to give you an idea to make sure we're both in the same ballpark. And usually that will let them move on. Now that we can have a conversation about their actual needs rather than talking about money. Okay. Another thing that you can do is you can start drilling down. Well, there's 3 or 4 things that I need to know. And so instead of just giving the answer, you're going to drill right. You're going to basically acknowledge that they asked it, that you need a couple of pieces of information, and then you're just going to go right back into your discovery. And that discovery can go a long time. And then sometimes I'm going to give you that. So there's 2 things. There's a third thing. Sometimes what they want to do is some people are just wired that they want to get a good deal. Okay. So what I have worked for me for years, and this is the truth, guys, I just do good for work for my customers. And if I do good work, they will refer me to other customers. And so literally almost zero of my business is from me out there promoting. I don't try to sell speaking things like this. It just happens. And so what I tell the customer is, look, if once we get you what you're looking for, right? If we do good work here and we do a good job and you get exactly what we're looking for, would you be willing to share your experience with somebody else? Okay. They always say yes. Okay. I'm telling you, I've never had a customer say no to that. And you say, okay, well, what that means is I don't need to make top dollar on this. I just need to be in the black, right? Because if you'll help me get into another account somewhere and just share your experience with somebody else, then getting me another one will save me enough money that I don't really need to make a ton of money. And so what I'm conveying is I'm going to give them the best deal that's possible. And I'm also at the same time, guys, I'm kind of programming them to give me the referrals once they become a client. Okay. And I'm telling you, I use that over and over and over with very, very large software sales with customers. And I did not have to wait until the customer was installed and 2 years later and happy. And that's how long sometimes these systems would take to get implemented. What would happen is, and that's my personal opinion, when you're talking to a customer, best time to get a referral from a customer is right after you actually close them, because they're excited, right? They're ready to use it. And you go, well, all right. And then you've already asked them if they'd be willing to share their experience. And now you can just say, all right, well, is there anybody else, that would be a good fit for this? And that's when they'll tell you. And it doesn't happen, but maybe 1 in 20 customers, right, gets this maniacal desire to help you. And so this 5% of your customers will suddenly just start feeding you customer and customer and customer. And it got to the point in my career where I didn't actually use any of the leads that were coming from corporate, because the referral leads that I was getting were so much better. I would just give them to the other salespeople and they would think I was like Santa Claus. But what I was really doing is I was protecting my time, because the referrals close at way higher percentages than the leads that were coming in from websites. So Jenny, I probably just went over our time right there with that, but there's 4 different ways of addressing the money question. We could do a whole session on what
For
happens when
sure.
people ask for money. But if you're doing a visit orientation, my advice to you is just tell them the price and then tell them how much value you got out of it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, I think the combination of the information we have and personal stories can't be overestimated. And to your point, I think if you are not on James' email list yet, you will want to sign up for that, because it's a very reasonable amount of time that goes between each of the emails. He won't be sending you something 3 times a day, but there are very interesting things to think about sales wise. And if I'm not mistaken, just yesterday or the day before, you sent something about how you choose the prospects that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you have somebody who came to you from a referral, which is everything BNI is based on, then if you are my neighbor's friend, I'm certainly going to follow up on that one first. There's a much higher likelihood that that's going somewhere than me just cold calling or hoping that somebody is going to connect me with the right person, because it's a relationship, right?
Yep. Referrals as a channel, if you consider it a lead channel, which most people don't, which is why they're not using it, it destroys everything else hands down. I mean, it is so much better. The referrals convert 500 to 800% better than the next closest thing. It's just so much better. There's no contest.
James, somebody's asked, how do we sign up for your email?
If you just go to that referred source, I shared the actual link. I don't know if it was Tammy or somebody very kindly in the chat box referred the link, so you could just click on it instead of what I typed. But if you just go to the resources page, you'll get the resources. It'll have basically some additional slides in addition to what you saw here, some additional models, and it'll sign you up for the newsletter. Okay. But there's also any of the pages on puremuir.com. That's my name's hard to, even though it's only 4 letters, it's hard to say my last name. So it's Pure Muir. Jenny and I were joking about this the other day. But anyway, that's why it's Pure Muir, so you can know how to pronounce my last name. Mm-hmm. But if you go to the bottom of any of the pages, there's a sign up there if you don't want the bundle. But I can't see why you wouldn't want it. I mean, it's free. So either one will get you that same result.
Yours is hard to say. Nobody wants to say mine.
There we go.
Or just if 10-year-old kids want to say it. Because they're allowed to. Yeah. All right. Are there any of this one, a very specific one? Kay Griggs wants to know, how would these suggestions work for a personal chef or caterer? Are there some angles that you could think of?
Okay. Yeah, so let me do it this way. So these are all kind of do you guys remember that little slide I showed you? It had little stairs on it. It said, hey, there's a lot of little sales on the way to the big sale. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what you're asking for, hey, what are the small advances for a caterer? That's what I'm hearing, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is an exercise in the bundle that will help you go to work that out, but it's actually unique to every single business. And so I could probably spitball it here, but what I'd recommend you do is chapter 8 of the book, and that same exact exercise is available for free that you can download. Helps you figure out for your business, what are the little steps that lead up to all those advances. And if you do that, and let's say you're with a company, if the more people you have thinking about that, the better. That's my opinion. And now you've got this big menu of possible advances that you could suggest on the phone. Well, you're not going to ask for all of those things. So you're going to say, okay, for this guy, this is the ideal one. And then these two are both ones that would still keep the ball rolling, right? Even if it turns out that they're not ready for this one.
Yeah.
And so if you do the work one time, now you've got a little menu of advances. And then as you plan, you're like, okay, before I call, and you won't have to take any time because you already did the work. You go that one, this one, and this one, and you're done. So the pre-call planning is super fast. And then what will happen is that once you do it a few times, you'll have them all. Like I don't recommend that you wing it at first, but once you do it a lot, you'll start to recognize a pattern to the little steps, and you may not realize that there were some little steps in there, but them just having a conversation with you on the phone, or them, if you have any kind of inbound marketing, them downloading a piece of information, right? All of those are little steps on the way to the big steps. So, but it's unique for every business. So it would be cool if I could say for every sale, here's exactly what you should ask for, but it's actually unique. If we had a little more time, I'll bet, and we turned your audio on, I'll bet you I could get it out of you in about 10 minutes. It's not that hard, but that might be, maybe Jenny wouldn't like me doing a full-on coaching session right now.
Well, then we're going to be right into happy hour, and I don't know how I feel about that. No, I think it's funny. He came up with a menu for a personal chef. And
I thought that I didn't. That was unintentional. But
well done.
But the chef can also email me, and I'll work with you. I'll work with you separate if you want to, right?
Yeah.
So since we won't have time to do it this way, then we can just talk on the phone. It doesn't take long to figure out.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again, James. Thank you so much for all this information. And thank you, Tammy, for managing. You answered probably 80% of the questions before they even came up. So
right.
Absolutely.
All right. We anticipated well then.
I know. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, you are going to get an email chock full of information as a follow-up to this. So you'll get slides and documents and links and all kinds of really fun things. And I hope you all have May 19th on your calendars, although we have set the bar pretty high. I don't know how we're going to match the caliber of this call, but we will do our BNI best. So I release you into your Thursdays, and thank you so much for your memberships. Thank you for what you're doing for your chapters. And thank you again, James and Tammy, for your help today. This was really, really great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you all.
Thanks.